Hello, everybody, and welcome to Breakthrough to Best Self. I'm Holly. I'm located in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am a food addiction recovery advocate, a hypnotherapist, and I practice sound. And this is my colleague, Lauren-Aaliyah.
Hi there, I'm Lauren-Aaliyah. I'm in Durban, South Africa. Like Holly, I'm certified in food addiction recovery. I'm also a keto coach and an NLP practitioner, neuro-linguistic programming. And together, Holly and I present these video podcasts because we've got such a special interest in holistic wellness and self-development and looking to bring you some exciting topics week on week. Halls, what are we talking about today? We've got another good topic, right?
Oh my goodness, it's one of those topics that I think many people experience: emotional and stress eating.
Yeah.
And I really think it's important for us to define what emotional eating and stress eating really are. Lauren, I'm going to ask you, can you share a little bit about what you've learned about emotional and stress eating?
Well, let me start by talking about the way I labeled myself for many, many years. And I'm sure that we have some of our viewers who use this label, own it. I called myself an emotional eater. I call myself a stress eater. And so for many, many years, I assumed that the overeating that I experienced um, came from the emotions themselves. Like the emotions led, I felt angry and then I ate. I felt sad and then I ate. I felt happy and then I ate. So, the emotion was like a quick step to the behavior. And now what we are understanding from, I guess, the neuroscience around, what actually triggers cravings in the brain is that emotion is actually just a trigger for the reward center in the brain. It triggers a stress response, and it's the actual stress pathways in the brain that trigger what we experience as cravings. So, it may sound like it's saying the same thing because, you go from an emotion and then I'm going to eat, but I think it is important to know that actually all the emotion is a trigger for something deeper going on in the brain. It's your brain tipping over from the stress of that emotion into this uncontrolled craving, which leads to uncontrolled eating, right? So, Holly, would you add anything just from, your own understanding and training on emotional and stress eating? Because that's the other one, is that we often hear these two being used together, right? This concept of stress eating or stress eater. I guess that's probably more accurate because it is the stress pathway that's being triggered, right? Anything you'd add to just your understanding of these concepts?
Well, I think it's an important piece to talk about the fact that it is it's something that's occurring in the brain. Because when we feel a big emotion, we feel it. Often we feel it in our body. And so, I literally thought that I just was one of those people that was just an emotional person. I'm just so emotional. And oh, I don't know why, but it causes me to eat. And it's so funny as we dive into the neuroscience and we see that the stress pathway in our brain is activated. And it's activated through big emotions, it's activated through stress, and it's activated, this is an important piece too, through the drug like foods. Okay, that's what I call them. They activate the stress pathway in our brain as well. So I guess if we were going to call it something, stress eating is not very far off from the description. But it is not to any fault of our own. It's not a it's but the good news is, Lauren, I know that I'm getting ahead of myself, but the good news is that knowing what it is, knowing how our brain reacts to it, there are things that we can do to help ourselves move away from running to the pantry when we have a strong emotion.
Mm-hmm. So Let's talk a little bit about that. When you say these things we can do, how important is it then if these emotions or this stress, whatever's causing the stress, if these are, what in addiction recovery terms we call triggers, they trigger off this mechanical process in the brain. If emotions and stress are triggers, how important then is managing those emotions or processing them? What does that look like? How do we move from somebody who experiences a big emotion and then eats over it to being somebody who can have big emotions and process or resolve them without eating over them? What does that look like for you, Holly? How do you, because we're going to have big emotions, right? It's not saying that we are going to be people who just not going to feel these things and we're just going to float through life. So how does that affect you now? Like, what have you learned to do when these big emotions come up for you? What does that look like?
Let's start out with the fact that it was a process. The process, I know that, removing myself from the scenario to getting a little bit of distance
Right.
from what's setting off that emotion. And I can't, I have a really difficult time processing emotion if I'm in the stimuli, heavily in the stimuli that's causing it.
Okay.
So, and then name it. Okay, I want to say name an emotion. And that might sound like it's so easy. Oh, it's anger. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's. I was a person who buried my emotions the majority of my life. And what was
Mm.
my choice? Let's use food. Let's use television and food. That was my number one go to. I learned it early in life.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know, I couldn't name what the emotion was. And if I had an emotion, normally it was anger, and didn't understand that underneath there might have been fear or sadness or something else.
Mm-hmm.
So remove, that was one thing. Figure out what is the actual, what emotion am I actually experiencing? So that was part of my process, just part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what about
I
you,
guess that's
Lauren?
I guess that's
Yeah.
the beginning, right? Is just being able to name it, like you said. And I remember just not even having names for some emotions. It was like happiness and anger or happiness and fear was kind of like there was probably two or three things that I'd keep going back to. Um, in fact, I don't even know that fear was one that came up often for me. It was just like, oh, I feel frustrated, I feel angry. With the big emotions or just feeling really happy. It was like I was either happy or sad or angry. That's probably the three emotions I thought I had. And now understanding the nuances of that and particularly understanding fear a lot more, I think, yeah, naming what it is I'm feeling helps us get closer to being able to resolve it. The other thing, adding on maybe Holly to just being able to name it, it's so interesting to me. And I think particularly now that I do, in emotional processing as part of the coaching work that I do, it's always interesting to me when we do this work that you can almost, well, and I don't even know if it's almost, you can every single time you can locate and identify and almost point to a part in your body where that emotion is actually vibrating. And Ollie, you do vibrational therapy. So this is something probably closer to the work that you do in understanding where emotions are actually located. And that is something that I don't know that I was always aware of. So as part of my emotional processing now, in addition to kind of naming it, it's been really important to me to understand that emotion is showing up somewhere in my body.
Mm.
For example, I think about fear. Almost always that fear is in the pit of my stomach. I think about
Yes.
anger and it feels like it's all over the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
I think about nervousness and or excitement sometimes in my tummy, sometimes in my throat. Like you can almost always feel an emotion somewhere. And I think this is really important as I think the research starts growing around how sort of positive emotions or positive thinking actually directly affects physical and mental health. I think it's important in the awareness of emotions to be aware that there's this direct correlation between what you're thinking and feeling in your head and how that permeates your entire nervous system and ends up having a impact on you on a cellular level. And that's something I didn't fully understand before, that I think is worth just thinking about it. And even if you don't fully understand the science of how it's moving through your body and going through your nervous system, I think just in the moment to be aware that you're feeling this emotion after naming it, you're actually feeling it somewhere in your body. My shoulders are tensing up, or my chest feels constricted, or my tummy is in knots, I think is an important part of moving forward, right? Then what happens, Holly? Then, so let's say you're aware, here's what I'm feeling, and here's where I'm feeling it. Then where do we go as we move through kind of resolving it? Where do we go next with that?
I think another important piece of this is to sort of go inward a bit and sort of locate where and find where these emotions are coming from. Where are they coming from? Sometimes sometimes it's very obvious, and sometimes it's not so obvious. And so finding out where they're coming from, it's almost like getting to the root cause in a way. If I
Okay.
don't know where they're coming from, then they may keep coming, they may continue to flow. And so finding out where they're coming from. And then another piece of that is thinking to myself, well, how would I rather be in this scenario? Like visualizing and sort of coming up with, well, how would I rather be in this situation? And there may not be an adjustment. There may be, who I am in this situation. And there may be, hold on a minute. I think I want to change the how I am reacting to these emotions. I know for me, if I'm going to the food, I definitely don't want to be doing that. So,
Right.
how would I rather be when an emotion arrives? And
Yeah.
Lauren, with that being said, what is your approach? Is that something similar for you?
Well, I want to go back to something you said, because I think that's an important piece. When you talk about where does it come from? Here's what's been interesting for me as well, is that where does it come from? I used to answer it simply by the situation that I'm in right now. And I go, oh, I know why I'm angry. I'm angry because you said this, or you did
Right.
that, or this person did this, or this thing didn't happen. So quite often when we're thinking about where does this anger come from, or where does this deep sadness come from, where does this fear come from, we can often get caught up in the just in what's in front of us right now and think that's where it is. In my NLP work, I find that the presenting problem is often never the problem. So somebody, a client comes to me and says, here's how I feel like about this situation, and I want to feel differently. And you do a little bit of kind of discovery work and you talk about it and you find out that actually this emotion is not about what's happening in this moment. It's actually linked to something else, often completely different. And so I just wanted to pause on what you said, that when we are exploring where does it come from, to really kind of meditate on that, if you like,
Yes.
really take a moment by yourself outside of that situation and think a little bit broader than what's just happened, and really think about where that comes from. It's been very interesting for me to find that the thing I'm feeling in this moment is often not about what happened in this moment, right?
It's
And then
surprising
visualizing,
sometimes.
that visualizing of who and how I'd rather be, again, just another important piece in what we are now experiencing as we walk through kind of this broader understanding of wellness, is that we can change who we are in these situations. And it won't be overnight. If I've always been somebody who responds in anger to this scenario, and I've done that anger is my immediate reaction or response in this type of situation, I'm probably going to do that out of kind of just a habit pattern. It's a pathway in the brain. This is where I go. This is where I go. This is what happens. So it takes time sometimes to show up differently. But visualization is one of those techniques that we can use to kind of see who we are and visualize ourselves differently, being a calmer person in these situations, or not being as scared, or being courageous. What is the other way that I want to show up? And of course, leaning into modalities that help with that, because sometimes it's something you can do on your own with the visualization, but sometimes there's other wellness techniques, or there's other therapists or practitioners that can help you with that changing of behavior and thought pattern. Okay, so what else, Holly? What else goes into shifting the way we shop? So now I've got a visual. I've named it, I've named this emotion, I've located, I've said this is what it feels like in my body. I've got a good sense of where this comes from. Maybe it's coming from something right now. Maybe it's something from the past. I've got a good visual of how I'd rather be different. Anything else that goes into not going to the food? Because ultimately we want to shift from being this emotional eater, right?
Right. And I think this piece that I'm about to mention is huge. If you're not going to the food, how do you self-soothe? And some people call it self-care. But if you're not going to go to the food to numb yourself out, you're feeling these extreme feelings, emotions on the inside, in your chest, your heart, your head, your shoulders, wherever. Part of loving ourselves through things is to take care of ourselves as we would take care of a very good friend or a loved family member. You've got a son, Lauren, and when he was going through a tough emotional time, were you in there giving him some sort of soothing talk or something like that? Okay, so how do we self-soothe? Because I know that, I can help others. I used to be able to help others, no problem, but I never did anything for myself when it came to that. What do I do? Well, I love sound. Sound is something that really, resonates with me. So I find, frequencies or sound or something like that. I go to a quiet place and you don't have to do anything. I can just lay there and listen to the sound, and I can feel my nervous system calm down.
Right.
I've got fur babies. I've got cats. I love them. They're awesome. I will seek them out, and we would just kind of lay together on the rug in the living room, and I pet them, and they'll purr, and it just calms my nervous system down. What are some of the things that you do to self-soothe, Lauren?
Yeah. You said fur babies, and of course, you got the cats, I got the dogs. And it's interesting because I often I go outside, I play with the dogs if I'm home. But yeah, I like what you said about calming the nervous system down, because that is what we're doing when we're self-soothing, right? It's these emotions. It feels like we've been activated, right? That's what it feels like for me. It's like, oh, I've been activated, activated anger, activated fear, or we call it triggered sometimes. So when you talk about self-soothing, we're talking about like just settling those emotions, like you wanted to settle. You wanting it to settle. When we spoke about locating it somewhere in your body, if your chest is constricting, we want to make sure that chest opens up. If your shoulders are all hunched and tense, we're talking about what is it that's going to bring that softness back to your shoulders. So we're talking about calming, relaxing activities that activate this I guess, the parasympathetic nervous system, where you're going to activate that vagus nerve. You're going to make sure that you're calming down. And so whatever that is for you, for me, yes, definitely playing with the dogs help. In a moment when I'm going to call it an acute flare-up, and usually that's my anger, frustration response, which is just like, oh, in the moment, breath work, breathing. Gosh, breathing, just tracking my breath. Tracking my breath in a moment helps to give me space. If I've got space, I think clearly and I respond rather than reacting. So breathing helps me in that acute, activated emotional state. Breathe. Just remember to breathe. And sometimes that's all I can do is just breathe. And then, of course, for me, if there's prolonged emotion, especially like fear and like deep worry or anxiety or confusion, then prayer helps me. I'm somebody who takes quiet time. I go, I pray, I connect to, my higher source, and that helps to settle me as well. For some people, it may be simple meditation, connecting to themselves, connecting to the universe. That, those are the kind of settling, calming ways that we can get some space between what's caused the emotion, and then we just get to think clearly. So then we create that space, Holly, using calming activities. And then what do we do? Is there anything else that just helps us again? Now we calm, we're not going to the food, we've done the other thing.
Yeah. And I just want to say one thing about the food, because it's a fake self-soothe.
Right.
It only reactivates that stress pathway and causes more stress. So, and okay, I'm going to move away from that thought now. But
but hold on a second before you do. It reminds me of something that Dr. Joan Eflin obviously shares as part of the research, is that food, not only is it not a calming, self-soothing sort of solution, but it aggravates and heightens negative emotions. Let's not forget that. So many times we think, oh, I'm just going to eat over this. And quite often when we're eating and we call ourselves an emotional eater, what we're really doing is we're escaping from the emotion, because that food numbs us out. We know now that the impact of that food is actually to blunt out emotions, which means we not only don't feel the negative emotions, but we also stop feeling joy and pleasure and happiness. But it aggravates. There's research that shows that it actually causes heightened negative emotion. So you may feel like you're escaping to the food and not feeling that, but it's actually triggering more anger, and it's triggering, maybe sometimes more fear and anxiety. So I think that's an important point, and I'm glad you mentioned the fact that going to the food, whether you're eating processed food or whether you're overeating, food that's considered healthy and clean, is that it may, it's not a solution to soothing. It's not a soothing solution. Okay, great. So now we calm and we feel soothed, and we've got some distance between us and whatever's triggered the emotion. And then what else can we do to really just close this off, Halls?
Yeah, so, going to gentle curiosity. And I know that you and I plan on talking about gentle curiosity in depth in another episode. But gentle curiosity it's like saying, I wonder how I might resolve this. Not, oh, you should have done this and you didn't do that, and look how terrible of a person you are. That's not curiosity. Curiosity is just saying, when this happened, this happened. And I wonder how I might be able to either, we could go to the person or the scenario that caused a flare up, but maybe there's, it's not safe, or there's another reason why we might not want to go to that person if it was someone who caused the problem. But we can always go to curiosity and ask, I wonder how I might sort of resolve this. And I guarantee you
Mm.
that just asking the question invites your intuitive nature to come up with an answer. And it may not be immediate, it may take time. Journaling might be another way to ask in a gentle, calm way, how might I resolve this in the future? That tool of gentle curiosity has been a game changer for me when it comes to emotional eating. I'm doing this because it's not necessarily emotional eating. So
Hmm.
it's been a game changer for me. And your thoughts, Lauren, on going to curiosity, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, it's definitely not judgment, like you said. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Um, it is that kind of wondering what does resolution look like? And I think important for resolution is all the insights, that we've got now, and where does this come from and what's it really about? And you've now got calm. Um, what does resolution look like? Where not only can I resolve what caused this emotion in this moment, but maybe even resolve where it's coming from. And so sometimes that looks like perhaps it's deep trauma from way back, that's triggering these emotions. And it's a case of, working through that trauma, finding help if you need help with working through that trauma. And sometimes it's as simple as having a conversation with someone. Other times it's not having a conversation. It's about understanding that I may need to set a boundary. I may need to do things differently. I may need to change, right? And I may not need to have a conversation. So I like the idea of gentle curiosity because it allows you the options, to at least see possibilities of what this looks like. And it takes you away from being single-minded that you caused this, so therefore you have to fix it, and that's the only way. Or I'm afraid of the future, and so the only way out is if I had certainty about this particular matter. And until I have certainty, I'm going to be in fear. um, there may be another way to deal with uncertainty, right? Because so gentle curiosity for me in resolving big emotions and the causes of big emotions means finding alternatives, finding
Absolutely.
options, opportunities to do things differently, and then hopefully fulfill what you visualized, right? What you visualized as an alternate way of being. So I think,
Nice.
Holly, if that is the process that we follow, how likely is it going to be to go, would you, if this was the way to manage emotions and process them, would you be eating over them? Like, as you practice this now, how, you call it a game changer. Do you find that emotions don't have to be things that you go and eat over? Stress is not something you eat over anymore. Is that been your experience?
Yeah, it has. And, as I was thinking about the fact that I am able to process my emotions now, it's it's a long-term realistic solution to my food. You know, um, I could have gotten a food plan, and I've done this a million times. Okay. I've gotten a food plan or a diet and followed it for a little while. And when I had a big emotion pop up, I'd eat over it. And then I'd be like, oh, well, I already ate over it. Might as well just keep going.
Yep.
Now I process my emotions. And you know what? It's not always easy. Okay. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm saying it's easier than being in the food for the rest of my life. And what
Right.
I'm saying is my relationships are better. And so I don't eat over a relationship that's not good. It flows into all aspects of my life. And isn't that really, Lauren, what we're doing here with our holistic wellness podcast? Is what we're doing here, how does it flow out into all aspects of our lives?
Mm-hmm.
Mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. How does it, and I think we sort of had the touch points of, oh, that's how this relates to this, and this is how this relates to that. So it comes back to being well in a holistic way, and living the life we don't want to escape from. Because if I'm not processing my emotions, I want to escape. And the way that I know how to escape is the food. So
Yeah.
not anymore. Now I know how to deal. And that is a game changer for me. How
Mhm.
about you, Lauren?
Yeah. Oh, undoubtedly different. I no longer use that label for one. I'm not an emotional eater. I'm not a stress eater. Um, and anytime I'm triggered into eating when I'm not hungry, I now know to look at what am I thinking, what am I feeling? And the answers are in either something I'm thinking or feeling that's driving this behavior. And so, yeah, for me, it's definitely been a game changer, being able to process emotions. And you know, I reckon we're going to talk a little bit more about this in upcoming videos, Holly, because I think we've touched on, I guess, the broad outline of what this looks like. But as you drill down to each one of these, they're probably a topic all on their own. But we really want to hear from, you know, people that are watching this video that have, you know, what is your experience with emotional eating, stress eating? Do you find that you're escaping emotions when you eat over them? Do you have calming activities that you'd like to share with us that maybe we haven't? Like, please do just hop into the comments wherever you find this video and tell us what you're thinking. And Hals, as always, just, yeah, another great topic. We could probably go on and on, but we're going to close this out now with an invitation, of course, as always, that if you enjoy hearing the conversations that Holly and I are having and you enjoy being part of those, please do like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you are notified when we upload a new video. We love having this time with you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.
See you there.